Thanks for the introduction, Chris, and for a chance to come up here and share a little bit of my story and career. It's early for me, but I see some faces I recognize, and I'm grateful for those and for the rest of you also. Hope this morning will be productive. I'm just curious, how many of, if you've come to 3 or more of these over the last year, maybe you could raise your hand. I'd be curious to know how many. Oh gosh, this is a faithful following. Well, congrats. This is not an hour that I'm generally, I'm up, but I'm not up dressed and looking like this. So good for you. You guys have been fortunate then to hear from some pretty interesting and pretty interesting speakers over the last number of months. I've been following the website, and guys who've had a lot of experience in business, a lot of responsibility in worldwide companies and pretty significant business ventures. Mine is on a smaller scale. We have a company that's about $6 million in total sales. We make products for private pilots, people who fly their own planes. Any of you out there? Any of you guys pilots? Okay, that's great. This isn't a networking event, so that's just great. But our scale is small, and my stories are small in those ways. But I think big from the standpoint of the ways that hopefully my life has impacted others, and that's a part of the message I'd like to get across. I use the magic of relationships in the description because there really is something magical about the way the relationships that we have came into being over time, and frankly are going to go forward over time too, that there's a connectedness about how we live our lives, that if you mine well, really builds wealth into your lives and in the lives of the people that you touch. And so I'm going to spend maybe the next 10 or 12 minutes talking about my history business-wise and sort of how I came to this perspective, because I didn't start out that way. And then talk about really 3 central reasons why I think relationships are the ways we ought to be focusing our lives instead of building our careers. Look at building relationships, and then your career sort of builds from the relationships that you've developed. Relationships, I think, they last longer. In fact, they leave a legacy behind as we move on. Relationships serve and touch us in deeper ways than just some of the things that come from the regular trophies of careers. And relationships connect us to the special aspects of our everyday lives. I mean, every day is a special event and a special opportunity. And if you're thinking in terms of your career and looking months or years in advance to where you need to go or want to go, I think you miss some of the special things that happen every day. So my career started out coming through I think you read a little bit of the credentials of just an engineering degree and then eventually a master's in business, but grew up back east and grew up in a very type A family environment where it was all about what you did, what you accomplished, and didn't have a lot of relational training and all that. My dad was a second-generation immigrant from Germany, and really a great story of somebody who pulled himself up by his bootstraps, not just him, but not our family, but all of his connected family. Few of them had much in the way of success in the way life measures it. And he made a difference for all those folks. And so I got a great education about what it means to work hard and to accomplish something, to plan and to pursue and get that done. And I'm really grateful for that. I also was, from a religious standpoint, I was raised in, I could say, the church of the right thing to do, because my dad we'd go to church every week, but there wasn't much about church in any of that. But always he was saying, well, you got to do this because it's the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. And so that was my background from a spiritual standpoint. Went off to college, engineering school, picked that because I was good in math and science and didn't like foreign language and English, basically. It wasn't, there wasn't any great strategy to that. For those of you who went through engineering school, you go through 2 years of core courses, and then they actually want you to pick what discipline you want to pursue. And it was only then, so what's that, maybe 20, that I was confronted with a career choice and basically said, I don't want to be an engineer. But I was already halfway through it, and the recommendation was finish that up. I decided I'd go on and get involved in business, probably go back to business school, and did eventually sort of pursue those first steps in my career map. Worked for 3 years in industrial sales in the welding industry. Went back to graduate school. And in graduate school, they definitely get you to map out what your career should be from there. I took a whole class called Personal Assessment and Career Strategy to plan out what it was, what the steps were. Where'd you want to get? Where'd you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And that was helpful in putting some structure to it. I decided I wanted to eventually maybe have some general management or small business that I might even get to own or run. Didn't really know how to get there, but I had a plan. Plan was to go out and get a job working first in manufacturing, since I sort of had my sales ticket punched from my prior work, and work in manufacturing for a while, and then maybe get some experience in the financial side of things, and then sort of groom yourself to be a general manager potential. So took a job with Tektronix. That's what brought me out here in the early 80s. And I had a clear plan for the next 2 jobs I was going to have in Tektronix. First was going to be a line management role, so that any good operations guy has to manage a group of people. And got out here. Well, things had changed some, and they didn't really have that job available. But they would eventually. So once you work with this accountant in the operations analyst area, that wasn't on my chart. And so, but that's all right. I serve faithfully every couple months, checking in with the HR person, saying, when are we going to have that line management job? And served in that for about a year. And a guy came up and talked to me one day. I still remember him, Ralph Seeberger, and he said, hey, I got this great opportunity for you. It's going to be great for your career, and what I need you to do is to come work with these engineers on a new product that they're developing. They need a manufacturing liaison for their work, to connect them with the purchasing people, to keep costs under control. And oh gosh, you can imagine, I'm going, this is not in the program, fellas. I had my career sort of planned, and this wasn't going that direction. And so I said, thanks, but that really doesn't work for me. Well, in the next several weeks, 3 more people, including the project manager, came and talked to me and said, oh, this would really be good. HR person, I said, listen, come on. We had a deal. I was supposed to be doing this. It's still not there. Fine. I'll do it. Trying to be a good soldier. And it was a great job. Not only did I learn a lot about various engineering processes, but in the end, 4 years later, that effort had gone from being a project to a product to several products to a business unit to a $100 million division at Tektronix. And I got to sort of bubble up in that whole process to eventually become the operations manager for this $100 million division. Not certainly out of any great wisdom or insight that I necessarily brought, although I worked hard at the various jobs that I had, but just the way it worked out, that the relationships that I had made and developed, as that business grew, they needed people obviously to set up the manufacturing process and the material system, and then to grow that and to develop the ways that we'd network with suppliers. And they didn't have very many people. I was the only one there at the beginning, and we hired a few folks. But so I ended up having quite a pleasant, excellent rise in responsibility and opportunity and pay and all sorts of stuff in my career that I really didn't plan. None of that was planned out in the way I had charted it as I sat in my business school class 6 years earlier than that. And so that was just one of the first real examples as I looked back on how relationships began to develop. But it really sprung even further from there, because the guy who was the general manager of that division 2 years later left Tektronix, got involved in a small business opportunity with a company making products for private pilots. And he got in over his head pretty quickly operationally. So he gave me a call and said, hey, you want to come work with me and with us in this small business? There were just 6 of us at the time, and sounded exciting. Went off and left the corporate world to do that. Became a business owner, and had a lot of very good experiences in that. Had a few poor ones in that the senior partner in that was eventually not somebody that I really had an alignment of values with. And Jerry Ramey, the guy who was the president and my relational contact, he left a couple years before I did, and he and three other guys from tech and I helped to found another business that they worked on, and eventually I joined them a couple years later. More relational connections, obviously, through Jerry. So left business one to get involved in business number two in the mid 90s, I guess. And but a year before I left business one, met a guy who was a supplier contact and began to work with him to source a particular product. This is a guy who grew up in Hong Kong and was educated here in the States. Ed, though, was somebody that I was just doing some purchasing work with. And as I worked with him in an intense way during that first year, we became pretty good friends. And I shared a lot with him about what I knew about the market and business. And so I left and went to work in business number two as a part owner in that business. And that was a wireless microphone business, by the way. That business still exists and is called Lightspeed Technologies. Well, not too long after I left business one, Ed came back to me and said, hey, I got this great idea for a whole new way of doing an aviation headset. And you know a lot about the aviation market. And how about you and I and this acoustic engineer that I know, we get three together and we can design and develop a product. I'll finance the thing, and you can contribute your ideas and channel connections. And I said, well, you know, I'm sort of doing this other thing, but if we can do it on a part-time basis, that would help. And it turned out everybody's very part-time. It took us a couple of years to get this product developed because Mike had his own job, the acoustic engineer, and Ed had other things going on in his work. But sure enough, that effort ultimately became the beginnings of Lightspeed Aviation. And then a couple years went by. That business actually got bigger than the wireless microphone business. And so in the end, we needed to separate those two. And in 2000, Lightspeed Aviation became its own entity. Ed purchased the aviation portion of that business out of Lightspeed Technologies. I joined up with him, and we've been at that now for the last 6 years and been very, very blessed in the market where we've become the largest supplier of this type of product for private pilots. Very fortunate. But you can see through that history how these relationships have just sort of sprung up and stayed connected. The one that I had with the project manager who became the division manager, who ultimately became my partner in two businesses, and I'm still a part owner in the wireless microphone business, and still connected with Jerry and some of the other people from tech that came over to help make that happen, and then Ed Lee, this supplier person who eventually emerged as a partner in a business. None of these things were planned when I was charting out my career. That stuff wasn't on the map. I had a good plan, at least I thought it was a good plan. But my career has evolved clearly from the growth of these relationships and how in the process of working together and being faithful to the people that you're working with, you begin to develop things that are special about those relationships that lead to other opportunities. And I'm a firm believer, as I really only caught on to this about 7-8 years ago. I sort of noticed how this had all happened. And have begun to really now just view my life and the things that I do, both within work and outside of work, in the context of the specialness of the relationships that I have. Don't know where exactly they're going, but believe that there's reasons why those have come into play, and that I play a role in the ways I connect with the folks that are part of my life. So touching back then on those things about relationships that I think make them significant and worth pursuing more than a career. They last longer. I mean, there's a legacy that we develop in what we pursue in our career that ultimately affects our life now and goes forward in affecting lives of the people that we touch. And I think back, and this, I looked up what legacy and legend were, because a long time ago I heard a guy talking about, do you want to have a title or a testimony? Do you want to create, do you want to be a legend, or do you want to create a legacy? A legend is a collection of stories about a person or a person who's at the center of such stories. And then it even says in Webster's, to become a legend in one's own time. People that seek to be a legend, I think, tend to focus what they do. They build the events of their life around themselves. A legacy is the effects of actions that can last generations. And I think if you're looking to build a legacy, you build that with and through the people that are part of your life. And so I really want to build a legacy in the things that I do. At the end of my time, at my retirement party, I don't want it to be a group of board members and senior executives in a presidential suite with a bunch of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I'd rather it be a picnic with 1,000 people, their families and employees that I'd worked with and their kids, and that somehow, what brings those people together is the things that were a part of my life during the time that I worked with them over lots of different companies and whatever the situation is. That to me would be a wonderful way to wrap up my career. But it's something we got to choose, because I think we choose our futures and how we invest ourselves in them. Relationships satisfy, I think, deeper needs. And their needs for connection and compassion and for personal touch, not so much in a physical way, but that also, that I think are built into us as people. And if we choose to spend our time and energy and focus on that in what we do, certainly what we do in our work, along with what we do outside of that, we satisfy deeper needs and again, build in some way connections that are significant for other people. As I look around here, I see folks from all sorts of background of my time. There's people I play soccer with here. There are people that I met back in Virginia when I was in business school that now our lives have reconnected out here. There's people that are here connected with me through work, through business. These are all people that are sort of the wealth of my life as I see them here. I'm grateful that you took the time to come out this morning and join me. But there's special ways that those all have significance. And those relationships I have, and I try to nurture them, not because of this, I'm building a network, or I have some reason for that. It's not out of power or connecting with them from a prestige standpoint, or because of wealth that they have or may aspire to have. These are people that when I see them, I smile because of the history I have with them and the things that have evolved in our lives that make that special. A couple guys here who I was involved in trying to develop a business, sunk $500,000 into doing this business, and it didn't work. Eventually we had to shelve the thing, and some of it had to do with frankly, even though they tried hard, they weren't able to be successful in a part of what they were trying to do. And yet, these guys are treasures in my life. They're people that I really value and respect for how they applied themselves to the problems we had, and I look forward to continuing to be connected with them and count as one of the great things of that failed effort the relationships that I have with them. And so it's not always in the successes that we get this sense of treasure. So, I mean, in the context of satisfying deeper needs, I think there's power and money and position that sometimes are what are held up as what we ought to be pursuing in our careers. And again, I'd maintain that when it's all said and done, both in the end and on a day-to-day basis, what you're really trying to pursue in your careers is to connect with people in ways that make a difference in their lives today and going forward. And when you do that, great things happen. Great things happen in your experience of today and in their experience of today, but great things happen going forward in ways that we can't yet even predict. The third thing that I thought was significant about focusing on relationships over the typical career development is that they do give us this daily context for our lives that really make life come to life. Through relationships, we are challenged to develop ourselves. For those of you that are married, you know that concept, particularly if you've been married for a long time and have stayed committed to it, you definitely know that concept. Our brides, really, they're a blessing, but they're a challenge in many ways. And I'm just terribly grateful for the fact that God put my wife and I together to develop us. And but relationships are a real challenge, and as you give yourselves to them, you get a lot back, and it's that way certainly in our personal lives, but it's that way in our business lives too. That if the focus of the guy you work with, who can be sort of an irritation, is if you take that and transform it into the role he's playing to change you into a better person, a more compassionate person, a better listener. It makes a big difference. I'll share with you a story of one of my partners. I mentioned the acoustic engineer, Mike, who was a part of our business as we got it started. It's a great lesson to me of investing in the right kinds of things to develop yourself and the other people that you work with. During the early years, the late 90s, Mike spent a lot of time working with me, and we developed a product and then a series of products. And he's a brilliant guy, but as many brilliant engineers can be, their habits and approaches to things are not always rational and practical and helpful in the business context. And so while we were successful in the product side of the market, my relationship with Mike continued to be stressed by the priorities that he had and the priorities that Ed and I had for the business. And so when we broke the business out of the wireless microphone business 2 into business 3, Ed and I decided Mike would not be a good guy to have as a partner in the business. He was getting well paid from a royalty standpoint. He had chosen to be a royalty participant from the start, and because the business had done so well, he did incredibly well. And we just really couldn't see how he would be an aid to us from a business partnering management standpoint. And so we went forward with that premise. Mike continued to be very well compensated, spent some time in the business. All this time he had lived in Minnesota, so he was never directly connected on a daily basis with the business. But our relationship eroded to the point where, while he was still collecting handsome royalty checks, he really wasn't doing much at all to support the business. And eventually, in the this is 2004, he came out, and we had to figure out, are we going to have to hire some other acoustic engineer because you've got another whole job you're working on, and you're not really helping us? And if so, how are we going to adjust the rest of the business deal? And it became clear in those conversations, it just bowled me over that the things that Mike had wanted and still wanted relative to being connected with me and our business had little to do with all the money he was getting paid. He really, I and we had pushed him away, sort of locked him out of the key relational parts of being partners in this business. And because of that, he had lost interest. And I remember one night in July when he was out visiting, so we were trying to figure out what to do next. I really broke down in tears and said, Mike, I have wronged you in significant ways as somebody who has been a significant part of the business life and has been a challenge, but an interesting part of my own development. I've not treated you in ways that honor that. And because of that, I've also really cut out opportunities in my life, and frankly, opportunities in the rest of the partners' lives to grow and be different. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry for having treated you that way. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And I understand you probably won't believe that. I've behaved this way for 10 years working with you, and so, but I'm not going to do that anymore. And how that affects what you do with us in the future is not important to me. What's important to me is that I'm going to put my best efforts into your priorities in life. and to make our relationship something that can evolve to a place that has greater worth and significance going forward. And I really did give that up, and he was at the point of just saying, this is no fun. In fact, that's what he said when we were saying, geez, we got all these new things to do. He said, why would I continue to work in a situation that's, that just isn't any fun for me? I got a great opportunity and a chance to be in a startup in another business. Anyway, the long and short of all of it was that last August, so a little over a year later, Mike came out with his family, spent 2 weeks in Portland, bought a house, moved out here last fall. He is a joy. Every day when I come into the office, I am so pleased to see him. And he's still the same quirky engineer, by the way. Those parts of his behavior haven't significantly changed, but every time I see them in a different way now. He's not a pain in the butt. He's not an obstacle. His obstinance is an opportunity to think again about what we're trying to do and why his perspective has relevance and value, why we got to integrate that into what we choose. So relationships on a daily basis have a way of challenging us and changing us if we let that happen. And so there's a specialness about every day in life that you can gain from relationships if you invest yourself with that sort of attitude. And I'm gonna close with a story that was in the LA Times about 6 months ago that just really struck me relative to this issue of making every day special. And this is making every day special on the grand scheme, but certainly if you apply it to your relationships at work, there are opportunities to do that. I'm just going to read the article. My brother-in-law opened the bottom drawer of my sister's dresser and took out a tissue-wrapped package. This, he said, is really beautiful. He discarded the tissue and handed me this lovely slip. It was exquisite, handmade of silk with a cobweb of lace. The price tag with an astronomical figure on it was still attached. He said, Jan bought this the first time we went to New York City 8 or 9 years ago, but she never wore it. She was saving it for a special occasion. I guess this is the special occasion. He took the slip from me, put it on the bed with the other clothes we were taking to the mortician. His hand lingered on the soft material for a moment. Then he slammed the drawer, turned to me and said, don't ever save anything for a special occasion. Every day of our lives is a special occasion. I remembered those words and thought about them through the funeral and the days that followed her unexpected death. I thought of all the things that my sister hadn't done or seen or heard, and thought about all the things she had done without recognizing they were special. I'm still thinking about those words, and they've changed my life. I'm not saving anything anymore. We use our good china and crystal for every special event, like losing a pound, or getting the sink unstopped, or the first camellia blossoming. The word someday and one of those days, it's losing its grip on my vocabulary. If it's worth seeing or hearing or doing, I want to see it and hear it and do it now. I'm trying very hard to not put off or procrastinate or say anything that would add or subtract substance or faith from our lives. And every morning when I open my eyes, I say, this is a special day. Relationships are like that. I think there's ways to connect with people at work and the people that are a part of our lives every day that make it special. And as you do that, not only do you get a benefit today, my belief is that you get a benefit down the road, both in your work career and in your personal development. And so with that, I'd encourage all of you to make this day a special day. Questions? Yeah.
Thank you. You've been very open, in fact, transparent here in sharing your journey. You alluded to a real strength in your marriage. And I was wondering if you might expand that a little bit more about your spouse has obviously seen you transform in your business relationships in many ways. And
Not always looking forward to that, by the way.
hoping that you might elaborate on a little bit is how did that affect your journey and vice versa? In other words, how did she affect your journey, your come alongside her, or where did the connection points occur in that transfer?
Yeah, well, she's my wife has a master's in social work and is involved in counseling for a lot of years. So for a guy who had not much of a relational upbringing, you might wonder how we ever got connected. But I think God has a way of doing that in people's lives, to put them with people that are dissimilar to them, and then use the next 50 years to chafe and mold them into more complete people. But yeah, as I've been through various challenges business-wise that have been both financial and relational, at times that's been really hard on Judy. She would have rather bailed in a number of those situations. And then what has happened as those have turned into bearing fruit in some neat ways, I think her faith in how these things can work, and how looking for and believing in and supporting the good of people and circumstances that you see, eventually, in my life at least, have turned around and returned the favor to me. Not always. There's certainly still a couple times that I know I turned the other cheek numerous times and just kept getting bruises on my cheeks. But most of the time that's true. And it's enough of the time that both for me and for Judy, I think we've learned to do more of that. So, yeah, Bob.
I find that sometimes when relationships make transitions, the prior relationships get frayed and actually broken as you move to the new relationship, because there's a finite amount of time in the day to devote to the people you like, the people you love, the people you work with, your children, spouse, etc. I find the real challenge is trying to maintain those relationships after they have been broken in order to move to new relationships, because inevitably something has to be broken, because that's the only way to move.
So is the premise there then that you only got X amount of time, whatever X is, to invest in relationships, and to add new ones, you got to somehow sort of prune or drop old ones?
Or give less time, just as a practical matter. And that's what I find to be one of the real challenges. If you don't have time for all the relationships all the time, life is a series of choices which can create hard feelings for those who are allocated less time when their expectations are greater time.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. Those are probably all truths that we struggle with, and for me, I probably end up not expanding the number as fast, and allowing the times I do have to be good ones. I mean, our relationship, Bob's somebody I met back in Virginia, and he moved out here in '88, and it's a good example, because I know I'd like to spend more time with you. We spend most of our time playing soccer together, but we try a couple, 3 times a year at least to get our families together to keep that part of our relationships connected. But yeah, we're all busy with kids, and they're growing up and other things. I think trying to make the time that you have with people quality time, and then I guess being in some ways selective of the priorities of the time you invest, starting with, at least for me, starting with time with my family, and then moving out from there to people either that are connected via work or connected via the history I've developed. So, but that is a challenge. Other questions?
Talk a little bit about the development of Tomato as a relationship, that whole story.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I think a bio talks about, I was president and founder of the Tomato Group. Tomato is actually, I picked the name because it was Greek for to honor and to value highly. And plus, there's very few Greek words that you can actually use and pronounce in a business setting, because they're convoluted and But the Tomeo Group is really a holding company that all the people that I refer to as partners in Lightspeed Aviation are partners in. Actually, Lightspeed Aviation is just 100% owned by the Tomeo Group. The business premise is that it gives us a holding company sort of foundation to build other businesses. We got a company called Lightspeed Industrial. For a while, we had a company called Sierra Dental until that business didn't work. And those are really more marketing or application-focused entities. But that was that business was formed to give us a platform to build other businesses in other market entities. So I never did talk about that in the introduction. We running out of time here, Chris?
About that time.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks for your time coming out, and I trust and hope that this was worthwhile.
Thanks, Allan.